Officer Holloway, step away from the locker. Drug couriers robbed under your badge. It's over.
After everything I put into this department, after 14 years on that road, yeah, I took what I was owed.
Once is a coincidence, twice is suspicious. Travis Holloway did this 19 times across 2 years and photographed every single one. The badge he used to rob people is the same badge that's about to be taken from him forever.
The burner phone, 19 Halls photographs.
You think they care about?
He would never sit behind the wheel of that cruiser again. Within 96 hours, Internal Affairs would seize his service weapon, his department-issued phone, and a personal burner he had buried in a tackle box at the back of his garage. 19 stops, $410,000, 3 years of armed robbery committed in uniform, on duty, while the body camera he himself controlled blinked steadily on standby. What state and federal investigators would pull off that burner phone would turn 19 deniable encounters into a time-stamped catalog of his own confessions. Before we go any further, I have to ask, have you ever wondered what happens when the person doing the robbing is the same person wearing the badge that's supposed to stop it? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're new to this channel, hit subscribe. We cover the cases that never make it past a one-paragraph local press release. Travis Daniel Holloway was born in Stonebridge, Washington in March of 1984, the only son of a long-haul trucker and an elementary school cafeteria manager. The Holloways lived in a one-story brick rambler on Larkin Avenue, 3 blocks from the BNSF rail line and a quarter mile from the I-90 on-ramp that would eventually define his career and end it. His father, Dean Holloway, drove dedicated freight between Stonebridge and Spokane for a regional carrier called Inland Western Transport. He was home roughly 9 nights a month, less in the winter. His mother, Patricia, ran the breakfast and lunch shifts at Stonebridge Central Elementary School for 26 years before retiring on her 60th birthday in 2019. Neighbors described the family as quiet, church-going on Easter and Christmas, and unremarkable in every way a working-class household in eastern Washington could be unremarkable. Travis was a middle-of-the-pack student. His 7th grade teacher wrote in a parent conference note that he was, quote, quiet, observant, and easily underestimated. His 8th grade physical education instructor described him as having natural body awareness and a competitive streak that does not show on his face. He wrestled at 152 pounds for Stonebridge High School and finished 3rd in the regional tournament his senior year. He told the yearbook staff in 1999 that he wanted to be a state trooper because, in his words, they get to drive the fast cars. After graduation in 2002, he enrolled in a 2-year criminal justice program at Calder Community College. He paid his way by working night shifts at the Conoco truck stop at exit 184, the same exit he would eventually patrol as an interdiction officer. He pumped diesel, ran the register, sold burnt coffee at 2 in the morning, and learned to recognize the regulars. The over-the-road drivers who came through every Tuesday. The vacation couples doing the Pacific Northwest Loop. The single occupants in rental cars who never quite made eye contact. A former co-worker would later tell investigators that Travis had a habit of guessing what was inside vehicles before the drivers came inside to pay. He was usually right. He applied to the Stonebridge Police Department in February of 2009. He was 24. His application listed no prior arrests, no military service, and 3 references. His wrestling coach, his community college advisor, the Conoco shift manager. He passed the written exam on his first attempt and finished the physical fitness test in the top 15% of his cohort. His academy file at the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission described him as consistently prepared, mechanically precise on the firearms course, and unusually patient on traffic stop scenarios. A handwritten note from his defensive tactics instructor read, "Holloway is the quietest cadet in the room and the most dangerous on the mat. Watch him." He was sworn in on October 19, 2009, in the 2nd floor conference room of the Stonebridge Public Safety Building. His mother pinned the badge on. His father took a rare weekday off and photographed the moment on a flip phone. His starting salary was $42,400 a year, plus a $1,000 uniform allowance and night shift differential. His first 4 years on patrol were unremarkable. He worked Charlie shift, 6 in the evening to 4 in the morning, on the east side of town. He wrote an average number of citations, made an average number of arrests, and accumulated 3 commendations and 2 citizen complaints, both resolved as not sustained. A 2013 annual evaluation by Sergeant Darrell Whitman read in part, "Officer Holloway has an instinct for the criminal economy of this corridor that exceeds his years on the job. Recommend consideration for specialized unit assignment." In the summer of 2017, he applied for and received an assignment to the department's Highway Interdiction Unit. That assignment would change everything. The Stonebridge Police Department's Highway Interdiction Unit was a 3-officer team carved out of the Patrol Division in 2014, funded primarily by federal forfeiture sharing and a state corridor enforcement grant. Its mission was narrow and lucrative. Work the I-90 corridor between mile markers 168 and 212. Look for indicators of bulk drug transport. Look harder for indicators of bulk currency transport heading the other way. Make stops. Develop probable cause. Deploy the K-9 unit out of Calder County when needed, and seize whatever the Interstate produced. In its first 3 years, the unit was responsible for nearly 40% of the department's annual asset forfeiture revenue. Interdiction officers operated under a set of conditions that, in retrospect, read like a written invitation to corruption. They worked their own shifts. They set their own patrol patterns. They selected their own targets. They had sole discretion over which vehicles to pull. Their body-worn cameras were a Stonebridge-issued Axon model with a standby function the officer could activate manually, originally designed to preserve battery between calls. Once a stop was initiated, department policy required the camera to be reactivated. Compliance with that policy was monitored, in practice, only when a complaint was filed. The unit's evidence handling procedure was the second structural weakness. Cash seizures over $5,000 required a 2-officer count. Cash seizures under that threshold could be documented by a single officer with photographs and a property receipt. The receipt copy went to the subject. The original went into the property room. There was no independent audit step between the moment cash left a citizen's vehicle and the moment it was logged into evidence. The third weakness was the population the unit was hunting. Drug couriers on I-90 were not citizens who could file complaints. They were people moving narcotics proceeds across state lines, often working for organizations that did not tolerate failure. A courier who lost cash in a traffic stop had 3 options: pay the loss out of pocket, disappear, or claim the cash had been seized by police and hope the organization believed him. Travis Holloway understood all 3 options. He had read seizure affidavits from other agencies for years. He had watched DEA debriefs in which couriers described being relieved of bulk cash by traffickers posing as police. He had attended a 2019 training in Sacramento on courier identification that included an unintentionally instructive section on how RIP crews operated in Southern California. The training material described the RIP crew model in clinical detail. Stage a stop. Project authority. Take the cash. Release the courier. Trust that the victim cannot report the crime without exposing his own. Travis Holloway took 13 pages of notes. In every published evaluation between 2018 and 2022, his supervisors used some version of the same complement. Develops his own intelligence. Operates with unusual autonomy. Produces results without supervision. 2 of those evaluations included the same sentence, copied verbatim by different sergeants. Officer Holloway represents the highest standard of the interdiction mission. He was named the department's Officer of the Quarter twice, in the second quarter of 2019 and the fourth quarter of 2021, both times for cash seizures pulled off I-90. No one was checking his standby gaps. No one was reconciling his stop count against his arrest count. No one was watching him at all. The first stop investigators were later able to attribute to Holloway took place at 11:47 on the night of April 8, 2021, at mile marker 196 of westbound I-90, in a stretch of shoulder bordered on the south side by a frontage road and on the north by a windbreak of black cottonwood. The vehicle was a 2014 Toyota Camry with Nevada plates. The driver was a 31-year-old man with a Las Vegas address. Holloway wrote a brief patrol log entry describing the stop as a warning issued for following too close. No enforcement action taken. No contraband observed. The body camera footage covering the stop totaled 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Of those 4 minutes, 2 minutes, and 38 seconds were recorded with the camera on standby. The driver of the Camry never filed a complaint. He never spoke to anyone in law enforcement again until a federal task force tracked him down in Henderson, Nevada in October of 2023. By that point, he had relocated twice and changed his phone number 3 times. He told investigators that Holloway had pulled him out of the vehicle, walked him to the front bumper of the cruiser, conducted what the driver believed at the time was a legitimate search, removed a duffel containing approximately $22,000 in bandit currency from the trunk, and let him drive away with a verbal warning. No paperwork, no receipt, no record of the cash existing at all. The driver said he had assumed he was about to be arrested for the entire ride east. When the officer instead told him he was free to go, he had thanked him, said yes, sir, and driven the remaining 480 miles to Spokane without stopping for gas. He never told the people who had given him the duffel that the cash had been taken by a uniformed officer. He told them only that it was gone. He did not work for them again. That set the pattern for everything that followed. Over the next 2.5 years, Holloway repeated some version of that stop at least 18 more times. Investigators were eventually able to document 19, though the actual count is almost certainly higher. The targets were selected from a courier route Holloway had mapped, using intelligence from legitimate cases his unit had worked. He knew the days of the week the bulk cash moved east. He knew the rental car aggregators the organizations preferred. He knew the body language of a courier who had just driven 600 miles with a trunk full of money. His method tightened over time. In the early stops, he switched his camera to standby for 2 and 3 minutes at a stretch. By the summer of 2022, he was running standby gaps of 40 seconds to 1 minute, just long enough to remove cash from a vehicle and place it in the trunk of his cruiser. He stopped writing patrol log entries on these encounters altogether. The stops appeared only as brief GPS pings on his unit's mobile data terminal, which logged location automatically and which Holloway, for reasons that would later embarrass 3 different supervisors, apparently did not realize. He developed a verbal script. Investigators reconstructed it from interviews with 5 of the 19 identified victims. I'm going to step you out of the vehicle for officer safety. I'm going to ask you to stand by the front bumper while I complete my search. I'm going to need you to look forward, not back at the cruiser, while I work. We're going to let you go tonight, but I do not want to see you on this stretch of road again. Every victim interviewed used some version of the same phrase to describe Holloway's demeanor. Calm, professional, almost bored. He banded the cash himself at home, using mustard yellow currency straps he bought in bulk from an office supply chain in Spokane. He stored the proceeds in a 600-pound Liberty gun safe in the corner of his garage, behind a workbench and a row of fishing rods. He spent some of it. Most of it he did not. He bought a used center console boat in 2022, paid in cash through a private seller in Coeur d'Alene. He paid down $28,000 on his mortgage in a single principal-only payment in early 2023, which his loan officer noted, and his department did not. His salary in 2022 was $81,400 before overtime. His lifestyle was, on the surface, a salaried police officer's lifestyle. New tires for the truck, a weekend at Lake Chelan, a backyard deck he built himself out of pressure-treated lumber from the Stonebridge Home Depot. One courier, identified in the eventual indictment only by the initials JM, was stopped twice in 5 weeks in the spring of 2022 and relieved of a combined $74,000. JM did not survive long enough to testify. He was found in a vehicle outside Reno in November of 2022, the apparent victim of an organizational reckoning over money that had never reached its destination. Federal investigators identified him posthumously through DNA on a coffee cup recovered from the Camry he had been driving during the second Holloway stop. His death was, on paper, unrelated to any Stonebridge case. Holloway was not charged in connection with it. The federal indictment named J.M. anyway. There was no whistleblower. There was no anonymous tip. There was no surviving courier brave enough to walk into a federal building and describe being robbed by a uniformed officer on the side of I-90. What there was, in the spring of 2023, was Sergeant Rachel Beaumont and a quarterly performance report. Beaumont had taken over as interdiction unit supervisor in January of that year, after her predecessor accepted a captain's position with a neighboring department. She was 36 years old, 11 years with Stonebridge, 2 of them as a patrol supervisor. She was, by every account, methodical to the point of irritating her own subordinates. She built her own spreadsheets. She did not trust automated reports. In April of 2023, she pulled 3 years of stop, citation, and arrest data for each of her 3 interdiction officers. She was preparing a budget justification for the unit's federal grant renewal, and she wanted clean numbers. What she found instead was an anomaly. Travis Holloway's stop count for 2022 was the highest in the unit. He had initiated 218 traffic stops on his interdiction shifts. That number was consistent with his prior years. What was not consistent was his enforcement output. In a unit whose officers averaged a citation-to-stop ratio of roughly 70% and an arrest-to-stop ratio of roughly 12%, Holloway's numbers for 2022 sat at 31% and 3% respectively. His seizure totals were also down, but not by enough to justify the gap. Beaumont initially attributed the numbers to a slow year. She pulled the 2021 data and found the same pattern. She pulled the first quarter of 2023 and found it worse. She did not confront Holloway. She did not raise the issue at unit briefing. She did what a careful supervisor does, which is build a paper trail before naming a suspicion. In late April, she submitted a routine audit request to the department's Evidence and Technology Division, asking for a metadata review of Holloway's body-worn camera activity over the prior 24 months. She framed the request as a training quality review, the kind of thing supervisors run on rookies. The technology unit pulled 3 years of camera logs and ran them against cruiser GPS, dispatch records, and the records management system. The report came back in early June. Across the period reviewed, Holloway had activated the standby function on his body-worn camera 647 times during shifts. The unit-wide average for the same period was 83. More specifically, 38 of those standby activations had occurred while his cruiser's GPS placed him stationary on the shoulder of I-90, between mile markers 171 and 209, for periods ranging from 47 seconds to 4 minutes and 12 seconds. None of those stationary GPS pings corresponded to a logged stop in the department's records management system. Beaumont read the report twice, walked it down to the chief's office, and closed the door behind her. By the end of that week, the case had been handed to the Washington State Patrol Office of Professional Standards and the FBI's Spokane Resident Agency. By the end of July, a federal grand jury had been seated. Travis Holloway, sitting in unit briefings, ran patrol the entire summer, believing nothing was wrong. The federal investigation operated in near total silence for 91 days. State and federal agents pulled every traffic stop Holloway had initiated on I-90 between January of 2021 and June of 2023. They matched GPS pings against body camera activity, against records management system entries, against citations issued, and against vehicles run through state and federal license plate databases. They identified 163 stops that produced no paperwork at all. They identified 38 that aligned with extended standby gaps. They identified 19 that fit a specific signature: out-of-state plate, single male occupant, no citation, no arrest, no supplemental report, camera offline for more than 30 seconds. Investigators ran every license plate from those 19 stops against DEA intelligence databases. 11 of the 19 vehicles were associated with known or suspected drug trafficking organizations operating between the Pacific Northwest and the Las Vegas Valley. Of those 11, agents were able to locate and interview 7 drivers. 5 of the 7 agreed to cooperate under proffer agreements. All 5 described being relieved of bulk currency by a uniformed Stonebridge officer who matched Holloway's description. The physical evidence came next. On September 14, 2023, a federal search warrant was executed at Holloway's residence at 4:47 in the morning. The warrant covered the house, the detached garage, 2 vehicles, and any digital devices on the premises. Holloway was not at home. He had worked a swing shift the prior evening and was on a fishing trip with 2 patrol unit colleagues at a lake 40 miles northeast of town. Inside the Liberty gun safe in the corner of his garage, agents recovered $96,400 in bandit currency, organized into 18 separate stacks. Several of the bands carried fingerprints that did not match Holloway's. 2 of the bills carried serial numbers that matched currency recorded as drug proceeds in a DEA seizure out of Sacramento in 2022, currency that had been released back to a confidential informant for a controlled buy that subsequently failed. In a tackle box at the back of the garage, under a layer of plastic worms and treble hooks, agents found a TracFone-branded burner phone. The battery had been removed and stored in a separate compartment. When forensic examiners restored the phone in a Spokane field office 2 days later, they pulled 403 photographs. 351 of them were images of cash. Banded stacks on a vehicle dashboard. Loose currency on the trunk liner of a rental sedan. Open duffels photographed from above. 2 photographs showed a Stonebridge Police Department issued duty belt in frame. Every photograph carried embedded GPS coordinates and a timestamp. The coordinates placed the phone on the shoulder of westbound or eastbound I-90 at the exact minutes and seconds that Holloway's body-worn camera had logged as standby. Cross-referenced against his department GPS, the photographs matched 18 of the 19 stops investigators had already flagged. The 19th was identified through the photographs themselves, a stop that had not generated a GPS ping because the cruiser's mobile data terminal had been powered off. The burner phone turned a circumstantial pattern into a time-stamped catalog. It was Holloway's own evidence room, his own chain of custody, his own confession. He had photographed nearly every haul before pocketing it, the way another officer might photograph a fish before releasing it. We are about to get into the arrest, the trial, and the sentencing. If this case is hitting you the way it hit me when I first read the file, leave a comment and let me know what stood out. Subscribe if you haven't yet. These cases need more eyes on them, and a quiet share is the only reason they ever get any. The arrest was scheduled for Monday, September 18th, 2023, at the start of his shift. Federal and state investigators wanted him in uniform when he was taken into custody, on department property, in front of the unit he had spent 6 years pretending to be a part of. He clocked in at 1:52 in the afternoon at the Stonebridge Public Safety Building. He stopped by the locker room, picked up his radio, and walked into the second-floor unit briefing room, expecting to receive that day's patrol assignment. Sergeant Beaumont was waiting for him. So were 2 FBI special agents, a Washington State Patrol captain, and the Stonebridge Chief of Police. The body camera footage from one of the FBI agents in the room captured the entire confrontation. Holloway entered, saw the assembled group, and stopped just inside the doorway. He set his coffee cup on a side table. He did not move toward a chair. "Travis," Beaumont said, "sit down." He did not sit down. "You know why we're here." "I don't." "Travis, we have the phone." There was a 5-second pause on the recording. Holloway's hand moved toward the radio on his shoulder, then dropped. He looked at the chief. He looked at the FBI agent nearest the door. He looked at Beaumont. "I want a lawyer," he said. The senior FBI agent stepped forward and informed him that he was under arrest, pursuant to a federal indictment that had been sealed since the previous Friday. He listed the counts in summary: deprivation of rights under color of law, Hobbs Act robbery, falsifying federal records. He asked Holloway to surrender his service weapon, his department-issued phone, his badge, and his identification card. Holloway complied. He did not speak again during processing. He did not speak again until his arraignment 2 days later. The Stonebridge Police Department issued a 6-sentence press release at 4:30 that afternoon. By 6, the local NBC affiliate had a reporter outside the public safety building. By 9, the story was carrying on national wires. Travis Holloway was indicted in the Eastern District of Washington on September 15, 2023, 3 days before his arrest. The grand jury returned a 41-count indictment, 16 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, illustratively under Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, 16 counts of Hobbs Act robbery, illustratively under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1951, 9 counts of falsifying federal records related to the misreported seizure paperwork that had flowed into federal forfeiture sharing. The Calder County Superior Court filed parallel state charges, including official misconduct, theft in the first degree, and tampering with evidence. His defense was led by an attorney named Patrick Voss of the Spokane firm Voss & Klein, a former federal public defender with 22 years of experience. Voss filed pretrial motions to suppress the burner phone evidence on Fourth Amendment grounds, arguing that the warrant affidavit had been overbroad. The motion was denied. He filed a second motion to sever the federal and state proceedings. That motion was granted in part. The federal trial began on November 13, 2023, in the United States District Courthouse in Spokane. It lasted 13 days. The government called 46 witnesses, including Sergeant Beaumont, 3 of the 5 cooperating couriers, 2 FBI digital forensic examiners, a Washington State Patrol metadata analyst, and a former Stonebridge interdiction officer who testified about unit culture under a non-prosecution agreement. The most damaging testimony came from FBI Special Agent David Reinhardt, who walked the jury through 43 of the recovered photographs side by side with corresponding body-worn camera standby logs and cruiser GPS pings. He did so for nearly 4 hours. The jury was given printed binders. When Reinhardt was finished, the prosecution rested. The defense called 3 witnesses. Holloway did not testify. The jury deliberated for 1 day and 7 hours. On November 30, 2023, they returned guilty verdicts on 38 of the 41 federal counts. Sentencing was held on March 4, 2024, before United States District Judge Eleanor Pratt, sitting on a designation that consolidated the federal exposure into a parallel state sentence under an agreement reached after the verdict. The courtroom was full. The Stonebridge chief of police attended in uniform and sat in the second row. Sergeant Beaumont sat behind him. 2 victim impact statements were read into the record. The first came from a representative of the United States Attorney's Office on behalf of J.M., the deceased courier, and was directed at the jury rather than the defendant. The man this defendant relieved of $74,000 in the spring of 2022 did not survive long enough to see this courtroom. His death is not on this indictment. His life was, and it is, on the record now. The second came from a former Stonebridge patrol officer who had served alongside Holloway for 9 years and who asked the court not to identify him by name. He said only this: "I rode with this man. I trusted this man. Every traffic stop I make for the rest of my career, somebody is going to wonder if I am him. He took that from all of us." Judge Pratt's sentencing statement ran 6 paragraphs. The portion that carried in the press was this: Officer Holloway was given a badge, a marked vehicle, and the discretion of the state. He used those instruments not to enforce the law, but to commit armed robbery on the side of a federal interstate. Against victims, he selected precisely because he knew they could not report the crime. He turned a position of public trust into a private criminal enterprise. The court finds the offense deliberate, prolonged, and aggravated by the defendant's official capacity. Anything less than a substantial custodial sentence would insult the institution he disgraced. She sentenced him to 12 years in state custody. The court ordered $410,000 in restitution to a state and federal forfeiture fund. The Washington Criminal Justice Training Commission permanently revoked his law enforcement certification at a hearing held 3 weeks later. He was transferred from Spokane County Jail to the Washington State Penitentiary at Walla Walla on April 12, 2024. He is housed in a protective custody unit, 2 tiers down from the general population, because 3 of the cooperating couriers from his federal trial named him on the record. His earliest projected release date, with maximum good time credits, is January of 2034. The Stonebridge Police Department disbanded its highway interdiction unit on July 1st, 2024. The federal grant that had funded it was not renewed. The chief who had signed off on Holloway's evaluations announced his retirement in August. The burner phone, with its 403 photographs, sits in a federal evidence locker in Spokane. The 18 banded stacks of currency recovered from his garage have been returned to the forfeiture pool. The marked Charger he drove for 6 years was reassigned to General Patrol. Its new driver was issued a body-worn camera with the standby function permanently disabled by a software update Stonebridge pushed to its entire fleet in the spring of 2024. That case was hard to look at, but the one on your screen right now is harder. Click it. You will understand why.